This is the Marketing for Learning podcast, the only podcast in the world that's guaranteed to help learning and development professionals enhance their skills, capabilities, and knowledge when it comes to marketing for learning. I think we can safely say that marketing for learning is a thing. Hello, everybody. This is the Marketing for Learning podcast. Hannah and I are here today because we are so excited to drop a brand new feature on the Marketing for Learning podcast, and that is called the Sunday Surgery. May not always be released on a Sunday. Just like to get that caveat in early.
We will endeavour to only release on a Sunday, because releasing a Sunday surgery on any other day of the week will break my little heart.
The alliteration makes me feel good, so Saturday is also permissible. So Sunday surgery, the idea here is, where we kind of arrived at is, in a lot of our client calls, we started to notice a lot of commonalities across our clients in terms of the pain points that they have, the challenges that they're grappling with, learner sentiment. There's a lot of commonalities across the board, regardless of organization size, regardless of industry. We're seeing a lot of the same things come up again and again and again. So what we wanted to do was ideally get some individuals who are actually dealing with real live L&D problems to come on and have a consultancy session with Hannah and I to unpick a problem. So the premise of Sunday Surgery is to give you avid L&D listeners an opportunity to let me and Hannah help you unpick a problem that's been bouncing around in your brain for as long as you can remember. Maybe it's something that you know is coming. Maybe it's something that you're in the midst of. The idea is to actually help you guys unpick that. This first session, we were lucky enough to be joined by Sky. Just to be clear, Sky are not a client of ours. They are just good friends that we met at Learning Live last year, aren't they, really? And the session that we just had with them was fantastic. It was really helping them understand how to create a more personalized learning experience for their people. And they're doing that through building out a microsite and really looking at what they should do from a branding perspective, what they should call that microsite, and whether they should call it something new, exist within the existing parameters of brand conventions and naming conventions within the organization. I don't know about you, Ham, but I loved that chat.
A brilliant chat. And I always love those kind of sessions where everyone's spitballing ideas and we're discussing the bigger problem rather than thinking about what subject line should I have on my email, which is equally as important. But I love getting my teeth stuck into big projects like this. So it's a really, really key initiative for the team at Sky. And I've loved thinking about how they can position that. And I think that's the key thing that we almost came to at the end, wasn't it, Ash? It's definitely more of a positioning task than a naming task.
Yep, absolutely. I think we tend to hop on brand names because it's easy. Oh, we'll call it this, we'll call it that. But actually, this conversation was about true branding in terms of brand experience, purpose.
Culture.
These are all things that were culture. Yeah. So, obviously we won't talk too much about it here because you're going to listen to it in just a second.
I was about to say, let's not ruin the whole episode. But this will become a frequent feature, hopefully, if you guys partake as much as we hope you will, on the Marketing for Learning podcast. But also, if you are attending World of Learning, if you are in the UK and you are heading to Birmingham in October, I'm not going to say the dates because I've forgotten them, I will be there essentially doing the Sunday Surgery live on a Tuesday and Wednesday, I think it is. But if you've got any problems that are going round in your brain at the moment and you want to come and have a quick 10-minute chat, please come to the Marketing Advice Surgery, because it will be like this podcast that you're about to listen to, but in real life with just me. But I'm sure it would be just as equally valuable.
You could take a cardboard cutout of me, or put my face on a book.
Should I just print a picture of you and just have it next to me?
Yeah, just my face on a stick.
Yeah.
I like that. I'm there in spirit. You never know. I might pop up. We'll see. Let's see what the baby's doing.
I think on that note, we should let everyone listen to the podcast episode.
We should, but I have one more thing to say.
Oh.
If you have a dilemma that you'd like to discuss with Han and I, All you have to do is email us, or you can find us on LinkedIn. Obviously, that might be easier. But if you want to email us with your dilemma, you want to come on the podcast like Lou and Stephen did and actually help us solve your problem for free, just the cost of a recording is all we ask, then just email hello, HELLO, that's how you spell hello, at mass, stop laughing at me, at mass, MAAS dash marketing.co.uk. So that's hello at mass dash marketing.co.uk. I will put that email address in the show notes as well. Hadn't stopped laughing at me. Right, we're gonna go now. This is swirling into ridiculousness. Enjoy the episode, guys.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Marketing for Learning podcast. This is a super special episode because today you've not just got me, you've not just got Ashley, but we've also got Lou and Stephen from Sky on the call. So hello, guys.
Hi.
Hiya.
Thanks for having us.
In today's session, we're going to be talking about a bit of a challenge that Lou and Stephen are facing at Sky at the moment with their branding. But I thought it would be useful. Everyone listening knows me and Ashley incredibly well at this stage. So Lou, Stephen, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, of course. So hi everybody, I'm Louise and I'm a senior learning manager at Sky. Sit within the customer service group within Sky, which is a huge part of the organisation. And it kind of looks after all of our customer services teams, so our contact centres, our retail colleagues and our home service engineers. So a really big part of Sky. And Stephen and I sit within the learning team within customer service group, CSG, and we look after learning platforms as part of that team.
Brilliant. Stephen, anything you want to add to that?
I think all of the above, more than anything. But yeah, Stephen, so learning technologies manager, get the absolute privilege of working alongside Lou in that space. I think just for a little bit of context, as well as that our team is a relatively new team. We're just coming up for our 1-year anniversary of an actual established team. So up and until now, sort of our learning technologies branch, the team has been a side of your desk role that's just plugged into a few different people. But yeah, obviously we know and understand that there is that need and that focus for the role because of just how large a customer base we service. So yeah, an established team since last year, and we're already making drastic waves in improving the experience for people.
Incredible. So what's brought us here today? I know it all started off with a LinkedIn post about your new learning platform. Is that correct? And what you'd like to call it. So why don't you give us a bit of context about what that is and why you're thinking about branding it and naming it in a particular way?
Yeah. I can give a bit of context and then Stephen can give you a bit of an overview of where the post came from and what we were doing with that. Just a bit of background. So Sky's an incredibly large organisation, international. So we've got Sky UK and we have Sky Ireland and Sky Italy and we've got Sky in Germany. So it's quite a large organisation, and we look after the UK customer service group. And we have historically had multiple LMS learning platforms across the organisation. So about this time last year, Sky procured a new provider and we were given instruction to bring all of our learning platforms in, so we all sit in one platform rather than have lots of different LMSs across the organisation. So that's brilliant in one sense because it gives us the opportunity to collaborate, share content, have one learning platform for everybody. I guess the considerations from a kind of user experience perspective is our audiences then go to this one learning platform and it's quite heavy in content overload. There's lots and lots of off-the-shelf content, which is brilliant in terms of a learning library. But from a user experience perspective, how do we make it really easy for our specific audiences to find learning that's relevant to them at point of need? Bearing in mind that the world is overwhelming right now. We have information overload, content overload, constantly, switched on and getting notifications. So how do we make it really easy for people from a learning perspective to find what they need at point of need? So what we recognized was a real need to create what we initially called as a working title as a learning shop window, which is your front door for all things CSG learning. So we can kind of articulate, what our core skills offer is, what our professional programs are, what our leadership development programs are, and all of the training that our people need, without having to try and navigate through a learning platform that's quite overwhelming and doesn't really market that in terms of tell the story about what's in it for me. You can go on a learning platform and consume content, but I don't know why I'm there and what's in it for me and what benefits this is going to bring and where it fits into the wider context. So we want to be able to bring that to life and tell that story. And an LMS doesn't kind of do that for us. So we explored lots of different options. We had lots of conversations with organizations that have similar types of challenges and things that they kind of are doing. But what Stephen and I discovered through a lot of the conversations that we were having was people were just kind of creating SharePoint sites, like a L&D SharePoint site, and kind of didn't really realize the dream that and the vision that we were having. SharePoint seems a little bit flat and not really that exciting in terms of the interactivity and how we can kind of bring to life our offerings. So we've explored a different solution. But I think the challenge also comes with we don't also want to create another platform on top of everything else that people have got to navigate, somewhere else that somebody's got to go to. We want to make it really easy for people, actually not add to the noise, but we also want to give it an identity. So this is where the post came from, is kind of, where do we call it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think where we landed into that, and probably where we fell victims to the route we normally take, as anybody will know, brand is massive in Sky, like absolutely massive. It's a big key, and sort of everybody, and Lou will know this as well, just from coming in relatively recently into the company as well, as that's what a lot of people say to us is, I come here for the brand, I come here for the brand. So we always try to attach that to anything that we do, to go, how do we create that same brand impact with the products that we produce internally as well as externally? And I think as well, what we landed on is that, I mean, shop window, front door is effectively what it does, right? It's your on sale version of that. But what the goal and the vision that me and Lou have got for this is, it's a bit of a culture shift as well. So we want it to be our version of a Google. So if somebody goes, I want to know how to do this, or I want to know more about this, it's how do we create our version of, oh, you just Google it. So that's the sort of culture and where we're trying to get to with this. So it's not just a case of us having a snazzy name for the sake of having a snazzy name. It's how do we create that so it's that trigger point and people anchor into that. And as soon as they've got that, they join the dot between going, I've got a learning need for this, so I'll go here. I've got a learning need for this, so I'll go here. So that's the connection we're trying to make. And yeah, the post that we put on LinkedIn, we've got some fabulous nuggets that came out of that. We've got some things that were like, I think people have kind of missed the point and probably done the exact same thing that we done, went onto ChatGPT and went, give me a name for this, and started firing out loads of names, which you do get some nuggets with, and you have a bit of a back and forward about, oh, I do like that, but if we change this. But yeah, I think where we landed on and where then this conversation got us to was going, actually, that's not the need. It's not just about creating the name for a name's sake. It needs to be more what's behind the name and what sort of emotion, feeling, call to action does that trigger in people when they see that brand or they hear that brand.
Absolutely. So, go on, Ash.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
All right. So I was going to say, just to kind of summarize, I'm going to execute my active listening here and kind of repeat what you guys have said in summary. So essentially what you're trying to do is create a single destination or location for CSG employees in particular to create a more personalized learning experience for them, because the LMS, whilst now unified across Sky, is still quite clunky. There's not necessarily a huge amount of personalization that exists for that specific employee group. And especially because when you guys first started telling me, I wrote they're deskless or incredibly time poor, right? They don't have a lot of downtime off calls, or people who are, out and about, and technicians and the such like don't even have a screen in front of them unless it's their phone. And so you're trying to create a more personalized learning experience for them that sits independent away from the learning management system, but is almost like a curated view of that. So you guys will be curating learning that sits within the LMS and essentially kind of back deep linking it through this microsite. Is that correct?
I think a practical example of how to bring this to life is, and this is something that Stephen and I have shared to our internal colleagues to try and articulate what this is. So you've got a mentoring program, right? So the microsite, shop window, whatever we end up calling it, will be this is what the mentoring program is all about. This is what you'll get out of it. Here are some really rich anecdotes from people who've engaged with the mentoring program in the past, what benefits it's brought them, and maybe some videos where we've got testimonials and things like that. How do I sign up? All of that kind of stuff. So it's your articulation story behind, for want of a better word, that's the learning proposition, right? Mm-hmm. If I need to learn about how to be a good mentor, or the skills I need to be a good mentor, or the skills I require to be, a good mentee, that might sit in a learning pathway on the LMS. Mm-hmm. The actual skills itself would sit else. The learning content would sit elsewhere, but the story behind what it is and where to find that information would sit in the microsite. And we've got loads of systems. We've got kind of knowledge bases that help our advisors who are taking calls know kind of at point of need what the process is for a particular thing if a customer's asking. So we've got knowledge bases, we've got SharePoint sites, we've got the LMS, we've got a HR site. We've got so many different platforms and knowledge bases across the organization. When it comes to learning, we just want kind of everything to be in one place. So if you're a new joiner, you go through an induction program that's led by a facilitator in a classroom. But if I want to kind of get access to, I don't know, acronyms that we might use across the organization, or handy links that I might find really useful as a new starter, you might click on the new starter section of the microsite, and it'll be like, here's a load of really useful links all in one place, so I don't have to go and find it all for myself. Mm-hmm. It just kind of helps to bring that stuff together, because an LMS doesn't do that, right? When you click on a content card, you might engage with a piece of learning content, but that's not what it is. It's the storytelling and the bringing to life and the bringing everything in and navigating to all of these different platforms that they do have access to, but making it really easy.
I think there's an aspect in there as well from what Lou's saying, because some people might instantly think when we're talking about some of those handoff points, you go, well, surely like an internal intraday site would do that. But we're being really specific around about everything that we do within this has a link to learning. So we're not just putting a link in there for a link's sake. What we are handing off to has a direct link to your learning journey or learning experience within Sky, rather than just going, oh, we can throw all those links. Well, I could effectively go to our intraday site to get that. Well, no. This is specific to that learning need you have. That's the reason why we're handing you off to there.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing is something that I've certainly advised to other clients, is creating a single location for people to grapple with. So I think based on the research that we've done over a lot of different discovery sessions in multiple organizations across the globe, learners repeatedly tell us, like, it's so confusing. We've got stuff everywhere. I don't know where to find things. And most importantly, I don't really know what's relevant for me in my job now in terms of how I become the most proficient in the role that I'm in now, but also how do I accelerate my career if I want to move horizontally into something else? If I want to become a project manager, well, how do I do that? Or, what's relevant for my role? That's what gets really lost. So I think first and foremost, to create a single location or destination for your employees to grapple with makes life a lot easier for them, and not have to kind of deal with this highly cumbersome learning experience, which, ultimately makes accessing learning and making the idea of learning a lot easier for them to grapple with. But then I think on top of that, when we're looking at, what that looks like, you guys mentioned culture. And really, it isn't really a brand thing in the truest sense of the word. We're not looking at kind of building out a new brand aesthetic, but it is a brand thing because we're trying to understand the hearts and minds of the people that you're trying to engage with and thinking quite deeply around the existing organizational culture in terms of how do we navigate that in order to kind of create a new one. So I think that would be the kind of first area that I'd want to dig in with you guys is, what's the culture like at the moment? What sort of naming conventions already also exist out there when we're thinking about brands? You said Sky is quite a highly branded experience already. What's your current LMS or your brand new shiny big giant LMS called? And we need to kind of understand the lay of the land in terms of simple things like that first before we can start to discuss what this thing should be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think if we touch on the culture part of that to start with, I think Lou's already alluded to this, right? Because of the population that we work in service of, because it is the majority of people is contact centers, so advisors on the phones supporting our customers, because they're retail and home service based, so they're out there either in shops or out in the vans and things like that. We've mentioned that they're really time poor, right? And it's a very directive approach to the role. So I do this between this time and this time. I go for a break. I do this. I then take a lunch. So just now that culture is very much as I will do my learning when I'm told to do my learning, which works, right? Because we have to factor in offline time and everything beautiful like that. But I think in that cultural space, because people are so time poor because of that, or so directive in their approach to things, when they aren't told to do it, they effectively won't do it unless, and that's a sweeping statement, right? You will get pockets of people that absolutely will, but in essence, you get people that goes, well, I don't have a need to do this just now because of my job, so I'm not going to do it. I can find other things to do. And I think a lot of that does absolutely come down to, because of how we approach learning just now, we don't storytell, we don't really market it, we just go, we need you to do this because it's part of your job, so go and do it, please. Whereas got that gap between actually the reason that we're asking you to do this, or the reason that this is important, is because of X, Y, and Z, and this is the impact that it creates, and this is the benefit to you, benefit to your customers. They don't have that storytelling and context to it. So when there is a bit of downtime and a bit of going, actually, what could I be doing here because I've got time in between calls, or I'm off diary for half an hour, fantastic. Because we don't give that context in the past, they don't know why they need to be doing it, they won't do it. Whereas that culture shift we're looking to do is, if we can change that culture to go, and anything that we do in learning, we will give you that story, we'll give you that context of why this is important, the impact to you, the impact to our customers, then it should, he says, the goal of mind is then going, actually, because I do understand that, because I am getting that information, I'm more inclined to be inquisitive, to go, I've got half an hour, let me just go and, oh, that's brand new, I understand what that's about. Actually, do you know what, that's not for me, or I can revisit that, or going, that's exactly what I need at this moment in time, fantastic, let me invest the time now to go and click through to the actual learning content, because you've told me that end-to-end story of going, why I've landed here, why it's important, why it's a need, bang, there I go.
I think just to build on that as well, we recognise that, the vast majority of our audiences do get scheduled offline time for training. And we also know that, development doesn't just happen between 9 and 5, right? We all develop ourselves outside of work and all of that kind of stuff. But I think some of our audiences, such as our managers, we call them leaders, but our managers here, they might not get dedicated, scheduled offline time. They might have the luxury of being able to, coordinate their own diaries to plan out time for development and things like that. I think even though they have that, they don't always know where to start. Yeah. So we have kind of loads of development here at Sky, loads of development opportunities for our people to develop themselves in terms of their careers, in their role, their personal development. And when it comes to manager development, we've got a group learning team that offer kind of core skills for managers, core manager development that spans right across Sky. But we also have specific CSG manager development, because we would tailor that specifically to, in the context of the contact centers or our shops, or, whatever that might be, and the day-to-day challenges that our managers deal with, and how do we support and develop our managers in that context. So to be able to articulate kind of what all of those things are for our managers. You know, you can access a new manager development program, you can access a CSG leader development program, you can get mentoring, you can apply for an apprenticeship. And so all of these different things are available for our people. But at the moment, we're not really articulating what all of those things are in one place. So our leaders and managers are telling us, okay, so you're telling us that we've got loads of stuff, but how do I find out what all of that is? How do I know how to apply for this stuff? How do I know if I even qualify to be able to get access to this stuff? So I think this site will help us to just tell that story, signpost off to, yes, there's some group content over here and there's some CSG content here, and this is how you apply for that. And this is some really useful learning pathways on Skylearn. But it's telling that story in that one place. They're only going there and then they're directed off to where they need to get to, whatever they want to engage with. I think it's also really worth kind of calling out that our learning platform, the brand name for our learning platform is Skylearn. And that's a really great learning platform. We're just, you know, recently procured the LMS, and we, as in customer service groups, Stephen's leading a project where we're migrating from one learning platform to this new learning platform, and that's a real task, right?
Fun for you, Stephen.
Yeah.
And we're not lifting and shifting content. We're really kind of looking at how do we streamline and strip back some of that digital content and just take over what we need. So things that would have historically maybe sat on something like a learning microsite, we've had to put on an LMS in the past because we didn't have any other way to communicate with our people. So we're starting to think about what stuff can we put on this site that we're talking about today versus what stuff actually sits on the LMS, because obviously it has a place and it's a really brilliant platform. We're still navigating how to personalize it and create, you know, audience groups and things like that. So all of that kind of stuff happens. So I don't want to kind of take away from the fact that we do have a really brilliant LMS and it serves a purpose. But the storytelling bit kind of isn't really the right platform for that. But also, I guess another dilemma is we don't want to confuse our people between whatever our thing is, this microsite over here, and the LMS. So we need to be really clear about what that is and what this is and not confuse our audiences. And that's another challenge that we need to think about.
And that's core. That's something that we've absolutely factored in. We're not at any point communicating that you should be using this instead of this. This is an enabler and an enhancement to the great content that you get in there. What we're advising you to do is to give you that context. We want you to take this route into there, because rather than you just going here and going, oh, that's a bit of content, I'll click in, or I'll watch this video or read this article without the context to go, why am I reading it? We want to give you that context before you then go, oh great, that was worth 20 minutes of my time because I knew exactly why I was reading it, rather than going, I've just wasted 20 minutes of my time because I didn't know why I needed to read that.
Yeah. So we've got Skylearn, actual main learning platform, and that's now across the business. Are there any other platforms or any legacy platforms that you've migrated away from? And when we're thinking about naming conventions, what were they called? How did that resonate with your audience? What kind of things have been done up until now at Sky?
From a CSG perspective, not much. We've also got our current LXP that we're moving away from, which people go to just now. But historically, from a CSG perspective, it's nothing much. I think and I suppose this, as I think about it, this factors quite nicely into the dilemma and just where the current culture sits, is because there's not been that one unified place just now, and because there hasn't been this doesn't get, or there has been actually, this isn't giving me what I need, so there's a need for it somewhere else. And quite rightly so, there's no damage to this, but people have then went off and started to create their own SharePoint sites and their own things. So our retail arm have got their own retail SharePoint site. Our home servers one have got their own version of that. And as we've looked through this, effectively what they are doing is just creating an article and then linking into our current LXP, which is exactly what we're trying to achieve. But what we're then saying is, actually, you shouldn't be doing that as the learning function. That's our job to do that for you. You should just be in a place of going, I click here and that's me. I shouldn't be having to worry about going, I need to build that journey before I get to it. So yeah, I suppose that's what's kind of brought us to the party with this, is going, actually, we know that there's a need. We see it happening just now. We've got a fantastic opportunity as we migrate over, because we had the luxury of an extra 18 months because of contracting, that we can do this. So let's spend the time to co-create as we go through that. So as we migrate our learning platform over, let's also create that environment as well. So we kind of join the two together and go at once, rather than going, to Lou's point before, let's just lift the shift just now and then try and retrofit something into it. Actually, we'll just do that in collaboration with and go at the one time.
Can I ask, obviously, again, I think a big part of this is understanding the current landscape and attitudes towards learning. So have you done any research, or do you have a kind of clear idea, particularly with your specific audience group, so CSG learning, well, maybe CSG, not CSG learning. Do you have any insight into sentiment towards learning? Obviously, if you had quite a lot of different learning systems historically, it sounds a little bit higgledy-piggledy, and you guys are doing some great work in terms of actually amalgamating all of that and making it more meaningful. What's the current attitudes towards learning, generally speaking? Do you have a view of that?
Yeah, so we've done, as we started to do the migration over. So like we've said, SkyLearn has been live for just shy of a year now. And again, we've got the luxury of, we didn't have to go all at the one time. But as that started to happen, and as the platform was marketed from our group learning team, me and Lou then started to do that bit of research and sentiment to go, actually, what are your pain points in the world just now? Rather than us just doing that lift and shift, let us understand your pain points. So while we've got the luxury of time, we can factor all those things into it. And a lot of thing that came in from that was personalization. So I just go somewhere just now and it's not necessarily relevant to me. So it needs to be personal. It needs to be quick, simple, and streamlined. So I need to go in there and find what I want in a heartbeat, rather than me spending 10 minutes trying to find something, eventually land on something that, oh, this is great, but actually I now need to go back and take calls because I've spent 10 minutes actually finding the content. So that was one thing. One thing, obviously, we've said about factoring in, it's just the volume and the noise of stuff on there. Like even in our current LXP, we've got 4,500 pieces of content that's on there currently, which every time we tell people, they just go, that's unbelievable, you've got that much content. So that's another thing, is going, how do we completely streamline that and bring that all down, so we're only giving people what they actually need. And actually, one that came out, which we are factoring into this as well, is a lot of accessibility needs. Obviously, the population that we service is 16,000 people, and there's a lot of different needs in there. But quite a lot of the sentiment that also came out as part of this is, because you're on a sort of a one-for-all platform, a lot of the times those accessibility needs don't meet my needs. So how do we factor that into? And that boils down to a lot of the things that we're factoring into this around about copy and images and all that thing. So there's a factor in a lot of that around about how does even how you put a particular image on there impact somebody's thought process to learning.
I was also thinking, you've spoken a lot about the work you've done and how you've got to this point. And I think that says a lot about your team. But I also think it's really important that you're creating this hub for your audience. It's coming from you, and it should also represent you and your ethos. So how would you describe your team and your team's ethos, and what's the purpose kind of your team? Because you've said things like you want it to be snappy like Google. So that tells me a lot about the fact that like you're quite fun. I've got from that, and I've got like the relaxed kind of vibe. You want to streamline, you want to make it accessible, so you really care about your people. But what else is it that what's your purpose behind your team?
I think our team are really relentless in terms of creating experiences for our people that connect with what they need, but also what Sky needs. So Sky's an incredibly fast-paced, dynamic, innovative organization, as you can imagine. So from a product and a commercial perspective, it's always changing, always evolving. There's always new products to learn about. There's always new processes to think about. And so in terms of what we do as a function, as in the CSG learning team, there's a lot of practical hands-on training. So because there has to be training to equip people to do the processes that they need to make sure that they're compliant and they've got the knowledge that they need to be able to sell our products or service our products to our customers, and that they are equipped with everything that they need. So it's quite heavy when it comes to kind of commercial and upskilling and the kind of training side of things. But also another arm of the team is around personal development, skills development, and I guess professional development. So although we recognize that there's all of this stuff that you need over here to train to do your jobs, we also want to make sure that people have got the ability to be the best that they can be, you know, have an incredible time when they're working here for Sky, equip them to be able to build their careers here. So I think broadly as a team, we're evolving all of the time in terms of, you know, our direction of travel and how we articulate our offerings and what we offer our people. But I think kind of we're always on. We've always got something else to focus on. We're always thinking about the next thing. We're always thinking about enhancing the experiences. So we're quite iterative and agile in our approach. And I think that's really comforting for me in particular, because that's really exciting, right? Because we never stand still. We're never comfy with what we've done. We're never like, right, that's it, job's done on. You know, it's always, what else can we do? What else can we do? What else can we do? And I think that goes back to our learning platform piece, right? So as we migrate from one platform to another, we haven't just settled with, right, let's just take everything, dump it onto the learning platform and figure it all out later. We've kind of said, let's take a step back and really think about what we can migrate across, but at the same time as migrating that content across, we want to make the experience better for our people. And yes, we might be launching with a bit of an MVP, because we can't have everything platinum plated all of the time, because by the time you do that, something's changed and you've got to redo it. So I don't know whether that gives a bit of a flavour, or Stephen, if you've got anything else to add.
Yeah, I think, and I've got a lot more tenure than Lou in the learning team, moving into my 24th year here.
Wow.
But yeah, I think if I reflect on that question and even think about what Lou said, with the experience that I've got and being in the learning team here at Sky for a number of years, we have drastically moved away from that sort of old school, dare I say, archaic of, we need training for this, we need learning for this, so build this for me, and we just order take, for want of a better phrase. We are very much now, and we vertically market and brand and sell ourselves as a learning team of going, we're actually an enabler and a complement to the business. Yeah, so it's not just a case of going, this is happening, so we need learning, build this for us. This is very much a collaboration and a working partnership that goes. And we're actually, even now these days, a lot more proactive in that space, where we go, actually, we see that you've got an issue with this. The data's telling us that you have a problem here, and we've done the work on it. So here is possible learning solutions or learning interventions that can support you with that. So I think that massively factors into that, what Hannah around about. We're not just sitting here waiting on the next thing to come into us to go, right, design a 3-day workshop on that, or write an e-learning package on that. We're very much, and don't get me wrong, there is reactive stuff. Everything's like that, right? That we'll always get reactive stuff that comes in, but we're probably on a 70-30 ratio of going 70% of our time is in that proactive space, looking at actually business need, business problems, where we're having the right conversations with the right stakeholders to get in there and actually proving that we're not costing the business money, we're actually making the business money because of the solutions that we're putting forward, versus that, do you know what, there's been a wider decision that happens at an exec level, and this is it just needs to happen. That's fine, we can factor that into our workload because we create space for that, and that's always going to happen. So yeah, I'd say that's where the balance is, but it's, don't get me wrong, right? If it wasn't exciting and different every day, then I don't think I'd still be here 24 odd years later. So yeah, it's I know.
It's an incredible tenure.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think before maths, the longest I stayed in a job was 18 months.
So yeah, it's exciting, it's ever changing. We're always finding different ways to do things, and this, what we're trying to achieve here, is just an example of that, right? Where we're going, there's a business need because we are moving platforms, but actually, as we just do that, rather than just that copy and paste, is going with the magic we know we can create and with the problems that we know that our people are facing, here's the work we can also do over and above just moving stuff from there to there, that goes, actually, as we do that, this is the experience that we'll give you with that, and build with you in mind rather than just going, here's what you need.
So you want learning to be meaningful. You want learning to be perceived as valuable. And you know, and not to say that that's not the case now, but it sounds like maybe that wasn't always the case, and there has been a kind of significant shift in perceptions, perhaps in the medium and short term with regard to the learning function in particular. I think if we're looking at this microsite again and kind of, going back to this, I guess zooming back in on the kind of core problem and the reason we're having this discussion, for me, when we start to look at naming conventions or what you might call it, it's really important that we understand all of that landscape first, because as you probably saw with that LinkedIn post, people just pluck things out of thin air. I think I told you guys on the initial call, my husband said, if you don't call it Skynet and make jokes about the T-1000 and whatnot, then and the Terminator, everything's gone wrong. And I don't think we need to be on the nose with it, actually. I think you've got Skylar, and that's kind of the master brand, if we want to call it. You guys aren't actually having to navigate a huge amount of other branding or naming conventions that you need to kind of circumnavigate, which is good. It means you have a lot more freedom. When there's a lot of other existing brands in play, there's usually a lot of navigation and politics that Hannah and I have many joys overcoming in other projects. I usually at this sort of stage, I mean, I've written down like buzzwords that I quite like the sound of, or things that you guys have said. Stephen, you said you want it to be something like just Google it. So to me, it has to be an active word. It has to be maybe not a verb, but something that you can turn into a verb, something that's short, pithy. It can't be, CSG learning. We can't use that. I know that that's the branding that you guys are kind of stuck with at the moment, but that's not what this microsite needs to be referred to as. You can own the narrative of what that is. If and when, once you've got this microsite ready, you do a marketing campaign around it, you own that storytelling piece, you really kind of explain what it is to people, you really work hard on answering that, what's in it for me. So, and that's almost bigger than the word itself, truthfully. If you can kind of own that narrative and own the storytelling around it in terms of answering the why for people, it almost doesn't even matter what it's called. It will become a thing if you continue to kind of build around that marketing piece. Yeah. Nevertheless, it does help if there is a name. So the things that I picked out when you guys were talking was, being an enabler. So, supercharging your work experience, being a connector, because that's essentially what it's doing, right? It's connecting you with a variety or a plethora of different learning experiences across the organization. It's something you guys have curated and spent a huge amount of energy and time doing that, kind of user journey mapping piece and curating the appropriate content that's relevant for those different audience subsets. So those were the kind of words I was playing around with: link, connect, push, enabler. I kind of like, me and Han would usually like brainstorm around those. We might like play around with like synonyms of those words and things like that. And then I also wrote, I don't know why I wrote yes, leg, and hug. I don't know. That's, that might be baby brain. But
I was about to say, with that baby brain, was you daydreaming about Ellie at that point?
I don't know. I think she was crying. But there, because you guys have Sky and it's 3 letters, there's a little part of my brain that wants it to perfectly fit in a 3-letter word. I don't know if that's just being entirely pedantic, but there's something really neat and tidy in that that I quite like it as well. I don't know. Have you been making any notes, Han?
I pretty much had very similar to you. I'm sure.
Of course you did. But why wouldn't you? I was going to ask the question about what your purpose is as well. Why wouldn't we just be asking the same things?
Well, you beat me to my first question as well. So hey ho. The one bit that you haven't mentioned is that streamline piece. And I was thinking about like the simplification of it. Line kept coming up. I just kept thinking like line, is there like I don't really want to go skyline, but like line was there for me.
Yeah, no, but that's like kind of like chain connector link.
Yeah,
it's building is something that's kind of building for people. It's the building of foundations. It's a spitballing, by the way.
But does that, the working title before was shop window, the learning CSG learning shop window, shop front, storefront, microsite, because that's what it is. But that they're a bit naff in terms of like names. But I think we need to be really clear that it's like a CSG learn, because it's not Sky-wide. It's for our part of the business, and it's specific to our part of the business. So I think that's another thing. Like if you caveat that with CSG learning, whatever, it feels really long. The name of it, but how do we? And then we don't want to go with an acronym, because I mean we all will have far too many acronyms in businesses nowadays. We've got tons of those in Sky. So ideally, we don't want to use an acronym, but it has to link to the identity, right? It'll have its own identity. So when people will be like, oh, just go to the microsite, you'll find that. We don't want to call it microsite, but that's like, go to X and you'll find that.
Can I ask a question? And this some organizations would say this is really essential and others won't. Does it have to have the word CSG in it? Because to my mind, you guys are going to be owning. So you've built this microsite. You've got that storytelling piece really, really, really robust on there. You've got all these different user journeys mapped around job titles or role requirements and the such like. It's really clear the purpose of that, and that kind of story is owned very much on the microsite itself. You're going to be doing marketing to your target audiences with regard to that. So they're the only people that are ever going to be directed there, if that makes sense. So there's a part of me that thinks, do we need the mention of CSG in the name itself? That it will be mentioned in your comms, in your marketing, and also very deliberately across the whole microsite as well. Maybe it doesn't need to be in the name itself, because it does make it more cumbersome and it does become a mouthful. It doesn't kind of, it doesn't have that kind of
away
simplicity.
from that. Google it.
Yes,
yeah. That's it. Once it's well established, everybody knows it's for CSG.
Yeah,
exactly. And as long as you're owning the marketing piece around it, then you don't really need to worry about kind of establishing that, if that makes sense.
I thought that just jumped into my head to put it out there for conversation and debate. Is just as you said that, Ash, where my head went to was, and I'll use Streamline as the example. It's something like, you're right, it doesn't have to be in the name because the market will effectively do that. But is there something in what jumped into my head was like Streamline by CSG Learning? So it gives that, it gives the who's bringing it to you, but that's not in the actual name of it. So go to Streamline, but if you think about it,
powered by,
powered by, that sort of thing. So it's not necessarily in the name, but subtly we can put that in the like powered by CSG Learning type thing. That's just what crossed my head as you started to say that. Go, you're absolutely right. It doesn't need to. We don't have to say CSG in the name, but actually, how do we still reference that to it's that subliminal? This is who's bringing you this.
You could absolutely almost have brand hierarchy there. So you could have the brand of what the name is when we come up with one. And then if you're marketing it in places that perhaps other people might see it, you could have the brand with powered by CSG Learning with it. But then that still gives you the fluidity, can't say that word, to have it as a brand name, because you mentioned it on our first call. We've spoken a lot about it today, but that kind of natural way of just going, oh, just Google it. If you inject it, like Ash was saying, if we actually inject it into the name, it's going to become a mouthful and people won't say it like that. And they'll come up with their own name for it, won't they?
Yeah. They'll acronym it anyways.
Yeah.
Or they'll abbreviate it to something. Because, people, the desire past of people will just always pick the simplest route to anything. They always do. So the simpler we can make this, and this is often the conversations that we'll have when we do campaigns and stuff like that, is you don't need to say this whole thing all the time. So you don't need to say, we'll just use streamlined because that's just a simple word that we're using at the moment. But, if you were doing comms, you wouldn't be like, go visit Streamlined by CSG Learning. You just call it Streamlined. To my mind, where you would add the by CSG Learning might be in the logo. Or, you might have CSG Learning throughout your copy on the microsite and occasionally mention it where relevant in some of your comms, but that's not the kind of overarching name, if that makes sense. So it's always there, but it doesn't have to be the name, I don't think, because I don't think you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, because you know more about your learners. I don't think specifically using it adds any value to people. They don't go, oh, well, because it's CSG, I want to know about it. Like all they want to know is it useful for me? Is it going to help me either be better at my job, get more money, or get a pay rise, or accelerate my career somewhere else, or just get my manager off my back? One of many of options. So again, I think, the notion of relevancy is somewhat tacit if you are doing marketing to just those specific audience groups. I think the challenge will come in, of course, is if they're receiving other comms from other learning functions, or if do you guys have like a central learning team or like a global learning team that does like the compliance piece and stuff? So that's the only other thing I think we need to consider, is what level of comms are they getting elsewhere?
Yeah.
And what other noise is there kind of diluting that perceived learning experience from you guys in terms of how much you need to take ownership of your specific CSG piece, if that makes sense.
And I think that's a good shout, just even as you said that, because if I think compliance specifically, because we're in the middle of a compliance campaign just now, which comes from our group learning team, they own that. But even in that space, even though all the communication that goes out in that ASH, any issues, access to platform, anything like that still comes through. So they don't even relate to the fact that that is coming from a different learning team. They instantly think learning, so they instantly come to us. Even a case of going, do you know what, guys? Apologies, I need to direct you to here, or we need to have this conversation over here. But yeah, there's never ever a discrepancy where people will naturally just go there, because that's not CSG learning, that's group learning. They will always come through us.
Our audiences don't really care who it comes from, right?
No.
All they want to know is that whatever they're getting is good stuff and it helps them. Like, they don't really care whether that comes from group or our team, or
they don't even know the difference, I don't think.
Most of the time they won't. Of course they won't. And if I think about some of the other systems, platforms, tools that we have internally, they are, whatever we call them, is generally related to what they do. So we have something called One Help, which is a help tool to help our advisors and people to be able to find processes, in the moment when customers are asking about things, or information about products and pricing and stuff. Or we have another one called Atlas, which is a similar kind of thing, where it helps people to navigate to what they need, information that they need. Sky Learn is related to learning, so the tools that we have, kind of, once you know what they are, they're easy to remember the names of them because they're connected to what you're looking for. So I guess we just probably need to think about the similar type of approach and have something that is actually relevant to learning. So it's not something so far out that actually doesn't connect at all. So maybe we need to think about what the principles are of the site and why we've got it. It's helping people to navigate to information that they need about our learning. So what's a word that conjures up that?
Yeah. I think equally, it is like we can spend a lot of time thinking about a word for this, right? But you can pick the word feather, and eventually, if you do good marketing and campaigns around it and take ownership of the narrative around it, it will become the brand. So I think sometimes we want to add so much meaning into things. Like, people were always saying to me, like, what does MAS stand for? Is it something Ashley Sinclair? And I was like, no, it actually stands for marketing automation, something or other. I can't even remember now. But, it doesn't matter, because MAS stands for something, but it doesn't. The MAS brand becomes its own thing because we do marketing around the brand itself. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be a learning word. Like, sometimes obscure words, things that stick in the mind. I always remember Kineo, the learning vendor company, just because it's such a unique word. It doesn't mean anything, and so they created meaning around it. And I think, like, sometimes obscure words can sometimes work, but there's a lot of different ways you can own the narrative around it. You can either really look deep in terms of what's our purpose, what do we want to communicate, or we can find something quite simple and unique and then own the narrative around it through our marketing and comms instead. So it doesn't have, simpler the better. I wrote down TIN. That's what it says on the tin, and you can make an acronym out of that.
But explore.
In it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Explore. Something like that.
And
I
also
think,
just to
again,
show,
go ahead, Anne. No, go.
And also just to show how these brainstorming sessions typically go. Lou, you said shop window. So I thought view. So then I looked up synonyms for view, and then landscape and seascape came up. And I was like, what if we just use scape? And then I Googled what that means, and it means like escaping, exiting, hiding from something.
Oh, we don't want that.
It would not work for your platform. But we have to do the bad ones. We have to rule them out. But yeah, I just thought I'd share where my mind was going and ruled it out. As we're on a podcast, I thought I'd share it.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think as well, like, things like explore, like, a lot of our clients will end up on things like, oh, we've got a new university or, an academy. These are all like really overused words. So like again, if you're thinking about something like explore, drill down into what you want to communicate because of that word and try and find something a little bit more unique or rarer, I suppose, than these kind of really commonplace words because they do get used a lot and I think people see them a lot. And so they become somewhat immune to the strength of the word, I guess, because it's so commonplace, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think, again, you could call it whatever you wanted, genuinely, and own it with your marketing. You could, we could change mass to bubble balloon tomorrow and still do marketing around it, it's more about how you guys own that narrative and how the marketing that surrounds this, in my opinion, than the specific name of it itself. So if you're really clear on who you are, the purpose of the microsite, what people are going to get out of it, all of that stuff, and we do some bits around. Have you guys done a value proposition canvas before?
No.
No, I really think I'll send you some stuff around that because I think if you guys did that process in terms of what it is that you guys are as a learning function, that will help bring some clarity to this, I think, as well.
Yeah.
I'm just conscious that we are like literally on time here. And Han, I know you have another call that you have to jump onto, don't you?
I've back 15 minutes, so we've got a little bit of time.
I
saw the time about 5 minutes ago. And I nudged that back.
What if it works for you guys? Because obviously, we could spend a long time brainstorming this and back and forth. Why don't Han and I get our heads together and come up with some of the ideas, at least that we've come up with today, and give you some starting points to kind of do this a little bit further yourself. Like I said, with the value prop canvas and thinking more about that brand experience piece. How we want people to think and feel when they interact with our brand, rather than just like the LinkedIn post kind of came out. Oh, you should call it this, you should call it that. Actually, let's think more about the experience with the brand itself. And then magically something will come out of that when you start to have those discussions. It sounds very fluffy, and in some senses it is. But it can really add value, I think.
Yeah.
It doesn't make or break things, but it can really add value.
Exactly. I think it's just a recognizable identity. So then people know when somebody talks about that, have a look at this, check that out. They know what you're talking about and they can almost visualize because they've engaged with it before. They know what value it's going to bring to them. I think today's definitely helped me think about not to get hung up on a snazzy word that has to include CSG learning, that has to have the word learn in it, or actually you can go quite creative with a name, because if your marketing and strategies around that and your campaigns are really strong and people recognize what it is, the name is just becomes embedded anyway.
Yes, exactly.
Like Facebook, like what does that even mean, right? It's not telling you it's a social media platform.
Yeah, when you really start thinking about a lot of brand words and names, they're weird and they don't mean a lot. And the meaning comes from the deeper notions of the brand itself. Like I said, that brand experience piece. So we'll send you Yeah, exactly. So we'll send you a few bits off the back of the call, and you guys could probably do another workshop internally to discuss some of this further. And I do think it will give you a lot more clarity in terms of the direction of travel, and where you need to be. But I agree, it doesn't need to. It's a typical L&D, like, well, it's learning, so we need to call it something to do with learning. Not really. You can go way beyond that because people don't need to know that it's learning, because you'll own that through your messaging and you'll own that through your marketing. So the brand itself is a kind of independent thing to your comms. Perfect. Right, guys. Well, I could have sat here for another hour. Thank you so much for giving us your time and, for coming and sharing this with our audience. Because, a lot of people tell us they get a lot of value from the podcast, but actually coming and sharing like a real live problem that a learning function is grappling with is so useful because, so much of what you guys have said, I've heard many times in other projects that we've done. And so I know that there will be a lot of resonance with what you guys are saying. So hopefully by you sharing your story, other people can help evolve and learn what they're doing as well.
Have you come across many clients doing something, aside from a SharePoint site, doing something like what we're doing? Or is that an ongoing issue and challenge that people have where they actually haven't found a solution?
No, truthfully, it's all to do with the systems that they're allowed to have. L&D's held ransom so much to what IT and tech is available to them. So, I mean, you guys are quite lucky because you basically have an actual website, right? Whereas most people can't, or they would have to jump through a lot of hoops in order to do that. So using a SharePoint site as a kind of funnel for that is better than nothing.
Yeah.
But there definitely is. I'm seeing a few clients who are doing what you're doing in terms of removing the experience away from the LMS or learning platform and almost making that become somewhat invisible, and then creating some sort of portal in whatever guise that might be to create that more personalized and inverted commas learning experience. Because I've even pitched it into clients when we've done projects, like create the illusion of personalization in lieu of it, right? So, again, curated content, curated pathways that are very specific to what your people are saying they want and need. That's essentially what you guys are trying to do, right? So the aesthetic, again, is frustratingly limited at times with some people's tech. But that is, I think, our lot in life in L&D, sadly. But the more we do what you guys are doing and work hard at proving value, saying no, not being order takers, and actually genuinely, doing more performance consulting and proactively engaging with the business, I think the more value that you prove, the more argument you have around getting specific tech. One or two of my clients are actually getting MarTech, I think. And have you got a client that's able to use like MailChimp? A small handful of my clients have been able to get their own email sending platform and things like that.
Yeah, I've got a couple. I've got one client that I was working with a couple of years ago that's kind of done exactly what you guys are trying to do. And we had the same conversation back then of what do we call it? And I'm pleased that we can share this conversation with a much broader audience. And I wonder, she was an avid listener of the podcast before she worked with us. I wonder if she'll listen to this and be like, wait, we did this 2 years ago.
Awesome. Well, of course, we're still here if you guys have any additional questions, or, if you want to kind of fire over some ideas, like I'll happily hop on another call with you and just kind of sound things out a little bit more. So maybe when you've done some of the tasks that we'll give to you, we can always reconvene and just have another little conversation as a thank you for coming and sharing your story with us.
Love that. Thank you. It's been really useful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm really glad to hear that.
Joining us.
Thank you. See you guys later. Enjoy the rest of your day.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.